Let me tell you how I got here. Layla was in the middle of table 7 when Karim al-Zahrani laughed like he owned the room. The sound cut clean through the restaurant's hummed conversation and the soft clink of cutlery, a deliberate, expensive laugh meant to bend the air to his will. He leaned back, wrist loose on a velvet chair, watch catching the light like a small, casual trophy. Around him, the table rippled with approval, Hassan with the laugh that always arrived a beat too late. Yusuf and Mahmoud scanning faces for echoes, Farah trying to keep her eyes focused on the appetizer and failing. He didn't bother to disguise the words. Shaftuha, he said, loud enough for his table and for the corner where he assumed no one listened. What a pretty face, I bet she can't even read a contract. His voice slid into a dialect thick with entitlement, comfortable words that in his mind were private jokes because no one in this room would understand him. They didn't. Not in English, not in the polite murmurs of the international diners. But one person did. Layla's hand was steady on the wine decanter as his sentence fell into the air. The steel in her palm was easy to mistake for professionalism. The heat behind her ribs was harder to conceal. She had learned over years that felt both long and lightning fast how to keep her face neutral. It was part of the uniform. Smile, repeat. Make people forget they were sitting across from someone. Bring the Pinot, please, al-Zahrani said in English, dismissive. And tell them my table needs more speed, we have places to be. Victor hovered nearby like a human shadow, nervous, practiced, grateful for the permission to perform politeness. He did not understand Arabic. He didn't need to. His eyes flicked toward Layla with that professional apology that servers learn to give. Sorry, this is their world. Layla saw the apology and cataloged it with the rest. The room smelled of lamb and citrus and the expensive cologne Karim wore. The woman at his left, Farah, twisted her napkin, attempting the formal smile of a junior analyst seated at the big table. She laughed once at a joke that wasn't hers. Her fingers trembled. Karim's words slid into cruder territory. You know what they are like, he said, the sentence opening like a blade whose point his companions couldn't see because they were laughing at the shine. They smile and they take tips and they dream small. Imagine if one of them thought they could. He let the gesture hang, cruel and unfinished, because completion is what makes certain men feel powerful. Layla moved with the speed of someone who has practiced patience until it was a weapon. She topped off water glasses, rearranged the bread basket, and placed a small plate of mezes with the quiet competence of someone who knew how to make the work invisible and the person doing it unforgettable only when necessary. Inside, the plan kept folding into itself like a carefully scored paper, each fold precise, each edge measured. For 4 months she had been invisible on purpose, a presence who could read the room without being read back. She had cataloged names, phrases, power moves. She had kept track of which men used English when they wanted to impress and Arabic when they wanted to be honest. She had let others believe she belonged to the margins. It had been easy for her to retreat through the narrow doorways the world had left for women like her. She had spent years learning how to return on her own terms. Karim puffed his chest and told Hassan about a deal they were closing, an AI fund pitched as progressive, polished, impossible to question. He named investors without irony. The table hummed with the currency of the rich, jokes that landed in other people's mouths like coins. Farah's laugh died halfway. Yusuf shifted in his seat. The woman across from Karim, someone draped in designer silk, checked her phone as if discomfort were best swiped away. These places, Karim said, the edge sharpening, they think service is worth dignity. They don't understand that it's a market. Someone to perfect an evening and then disappear. That's all they are. The words were not new. They had been said in boardrooms and backrooms, in the corners of flights and the half-drunk conversations of men who saw other people's lives as background noise. What was new was the assumption that the background couldn't listen. That she, Layla, couldn't understand, couldn't translate, couldn't answer. She could. Her training had not been about cruelty, it was about accuracy. If he wanted to test the hypothesis of impunity, she would provide the data. But first, she would choose the instrument. The restaurant's lighting softened the edges of everything. A server dropped a tray at a table across the room and cursed under his breath, and the sound was swallowed by a chorus of apologies. In 2 minutes, Victor would hand Karim the dessert menu. In 5 minutes, the room would refocus on itself. In 10 minutes Karim would make a joke he thought only his table would understand. Layla placed the decanter back in the tray and felt the microseconds stretch like elastic. She remembered Whitmore's press conference, the smile, the stale applause when her name did not appear on the slide. She remembered the emails that followed, the polite severances, the quiet way people who took credit say business like it's a shield. She had practiced the face of leaving 1,000 times. She had practiced the face of coming back with purpose 1,000 more. 3 choices ran through her like a checklist. Stay silent and be invisible as he expected. Walk away as she had done once before when it cost less to preserve peace than to risk exposure. Do what she'd been training for these past months, counter quietly, build leverage, let systems do their work. Or a 4th choice, something she hadn't named aloud until that moment, step into the language they'd used as their safe room and make it public. As she set the glass down for the next table, her jaw tightened. The choice that settled in her throat felt like the hinge of a door. She had 3 choices: stay silent like he expected, walk away like I'd done at Whitmore, or do what I'd been training for these past 4 months. I chose option 4, the one he'd never see coming. I waited until the room's noise braided into itself, forks, a low string of conversation, the far hum of the kitchen. Then I let the past arrive. 6 months earlier, I had been a consultant in a glass-walled conference room with a view of London's river, a different city, a different language for power. I had worn a suit that made people take me seriously and a name they could pronounce without a pause. Layla Al-Rashid. I had built models and written clauses and stayed late until the lights in the office hummed like a second heartbeat. I had been good at the work people paid for when they wanted plausible deniability. Whitmore Consulting called on me for the Gulf expansion. Richard Whitmore was the kind of man whose handshake assumed victory. He thanked me between bites of whatever expensive lunch his assistant picked up. My role was to make expansion safe, compliance frameworks, cultural briefings, harassment prevention that looked performative on slide decks, but could be enforced if anyone cared to do the hard thing. I remember the Dubai negotiation like a film, still, stiff posture, a room smelling faintly of oud, investors speaking through translators, a clock that measured patience in minutes. There was a moment when a partner in the room mentioned Ramadan dates and the potential impact on delivery timelines. I flagged it, showed where operations could collapse if we ignored cultural cadence, and proposed a restructure of timelines that saved the deal and kept reputations intact. They thanked me. The Gulf investors asked for the person who had done the math. They asked for me by name. The deal closed. The press released a photo of Whitmore smiling across a table with Emirati partners. My signature was on the internal memos. My face was not on the slide that made headlines. Then Richard took credit. Not subtly. At a press conference he held 2 weeks later, he talked about our team's insight into operational timelines and smiled in a way that erased anyone who had done the work. It was a practiced smile, one I had seen before from men whose memory of other people's labor didn't extend past the moment they could claim it. Just business, Layla, he said later when I confronted him in the glass hallway. His voice had the casual cruelty of habit. You know how the board likes a spokesperson, don't take it personal. I left Whitmore the next day. I walked out of an office that had been my anchor with my head held in the way people in the hallway might later describe as dignified. I did not weep in the elevator. I did not slam my resignation on his desk. I left quietly with my laptop and a folder of notes, and I breathed the sharp air of a life that had been miscalculated. People called it betrayal. I called it data. There is a difference between being hurt and being informed. The humiliation was a fact. The lesson was another. I had spent a career translating complexity into compliance. I had learned how systems protected the powerful. I had also learned where those systems left gaps, little places that, if nudged, would topple a false narrative without resorting to spectacle. The seed of an experiment took root in that gap. My mother's voice threaded through my mind then, her sociology talks at the dinner table, the stories of relatives who learned to make less visible choices to survive. If you are to be invisible, she said once, make invisibility your cloak, not a prison. That phrase sat in me like a compass. I could vanish or I could choose where to reappear. Dubai was not a random selection, it was methodical. The peninsula's image, polished service, global clientele, carefully curated dignity made it the ideal laboratory. It was a space where the wealthy were encouraged to perform their best manners in public and their worst truths in private tongues. So I crafted the plan. First, change my name on the reservation list to my mother's maiden name. Small deception, large consequence. It removed immediate linkages. It allowed me to observe without the baggage of a public persona. Second, take the job at the Peninsula as a server. The first week was its own education. I learned how the staff measured its worth in tips and smiles. I learned which managers turned a blind eye and which ones took tiny, quiet risks for their teams. I kept an encrypted file, audio logs, nights and dates, a name here, a laugh there. I learned to move through the restaurant's choreography until my presence felt incidental. Third, spend evenings rebuilding myself away from the floor, research, court records, NDAs, whispers. I found enough to map an architecture of erasure. Settlements disguised as confidential resolutions, executives who moved between companies like weather, patterns of promoted employees who learned to stay silent. I told myself often at 3 in the morning that this experiment was a privilege. I could leave. I had the kind of background that allowed extraction. Real servers do not get the luxury of staging an experiment. They get the luxury of surviving. I wrote that line into my notes more than once. If I succeed, I must not make this about me. It must be about exposing a pattern. Victor saw me on my first day and treated me like every new hire, polite, efficient, slightly wary. He taught me the flow of service, how to fill a glass so it never splashed, how to take an order and fold it into memorized ritual. Victor liked the rhythm of predictability. It made him feel safe. I learned his politeness had edges shaped by fear, fear of losing a good table, fear of a manager's reprimand. Later, his fear would be useful data. There were nights I almost quit the experiment. There were patrons who were kind, who noticed my efficiency and left a kind note to the manager. Those small mercies kept me honest. But then came nights like Table 7, men who assumed language was a wall and not a door. Men who thought they could trade cruelty for anonymity. When I first saw Karam's name on the reservation list 3 hours before service, I felt a small, cold thrill. It was the kind of calculation that felt like working a chessboard. I checked my encryption log. I texted Nadia, he's on the list, I need backup, bring legal, bring the recorder. Nadia replied with exactly the kind of steady yes a trained researcher gives. On my way, don't do anything stupid. I did not plan for spectacle, I planned for leverage. The point was not to humiliate for sport, but to collect truth and present it to those who could not pretend ignorance. I had thought of threats and counters, a policy Whitmore once said would never be enforced if the wealthy appealed hard enough. I did not trust policy, I trusted evidence. So when Karam laughed tonight and used Arabic as his private room, when his table punctured the polite hum with cruel ease, I did not let anger take the wheel. I let the archive take the lead. I felt only a surgeon's detachment, an editor deciding which paragraph to publish. My hand moved across the table as if in a practice script. My face remained a placid surface. Inside, I read his cadence, the syllables that betrayed not just contempt but habit, a man who performed dominion to remind himself he had it. He believed language secured impunity. He was wrong. Karam's voice kept slipping between languages, switching the way some men switch posture, one for performance, one for truth. English for the performance, Arabic for the truth. He believed the truth was safe in a language he assumed no one here carried with authority. He hadn't accounted for me. Layla, Victor whispered as I passed him with the dessert tray. Table 7, please be extra attentive. They're important tonight. Mr. Fairmont is expecting a business update from them in the morning. No mistakes. No mistakes. He said it like a warning. I received it like a green light. Back at the table, Karam was relaxed now, wine softening his vowels, entitlement sharpening his consonants. Bring the kanafa, he told me without looking up. Then to Hassan in Arabic. I swear they hire these girls just to give the place atmosphere. Pretty faces, empty heads. Hassan laughed, Yusuf didn't. I'm serious, Karam continued. Look at her, polished yes, but there's a limit. She probably shares a room with 5 cousins. Maybe sends money to some village out in the desert. Not original, not clever, just the same tired hierarchy spoken in a new zip code. I set the dessert plates carefully, deliberately, so that my hands would stop shaking. not from fear, from anticipation. Each gesture, each placement of silverware, each small nod was part of a choreography that would give me clean footing for the next step. "Thank you," Farah murmured as I placed her plate. Her eyes met mine quickly, apologetically, as though attempting to distance herself from the men she worked for. She had said nothing all evening, but her silence was not consent. It was survival. Karim caught her glance. "What?" he snapped. "You're suddenly polite to the help." Farah's fingers tightened on her napkin. "That's why women struggle in our field," Karim said, switching back to Arabic. "Too emotional. Too easily distracted." A small fracture moved across Farah's face, hairline quiet but visible if you were trained to observe. I filed it away. It meant something big. Karim continued, oblivious. "Anyway, this one is obedient enough, moves fast, doesn't think too much." I smiled, a practiced, neutral smile. Inside, my pulse hardened to a steady, clinical beat, data point after data point. His voice grew louder as the whine deepened. "People like her don't aspire," he said, leaning back. "They exist, they serve, and they know their place." No, they don't, but he didn't know that yet. He leaned closer to Hassan and lowered his voice, though not enough. "I wonder," he said slowly, "how much it would cost to—" The sentence that followed was knife-sharp, filthy, dehumanizing in a way that made Farah gasp silently behind her hand. Yusuf's shoulders tightened, even Mahmoud froze. The words hit the table like a glass dropped on marble. I felt my throat tighten, not in shame but in recognition. There it is, the line, finally. Karim smirked, pleased with the reaction. "It was a joke," he added with a shrug, as if cruelty could be softened by pretending it wore humor's clothes. He didn't see me straighten. He didn't see the shift in my posture, the kind of shift that says, a threshold just crossed. My mind sharpened with the clarity of cold steel. Now, I placed the final dessert plate in front of him with a calmness that wasn't calm at all, it was precision. Then I stood upright. And for the first time that night, I met his eyes. The world paused, not literally. The room moved on, waiters passed by, a spoon clinked somewhere, but in the space between him and me, something stilled. He blinked, confused by the confidence in my stance. He sensed something, but not enough to fear it. Yet, "Is there a problem?" he asked in English, smiling like a man used to watching women swallow their discomfort. I answered him in Arabic, fluent, formal, unmistakably educated. The dialect of the elite he used to impress investors. "Excuse me, Mr. Al-Zarani," I said, evenly, clearly. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation." The words dropped like stones into a silent pool. Hassan's laugh strangled itself mid-exhale. Mahmoud froze. Yusuf looked at me as though seeing me for the first time. Farah's hand flew to her mouth. David, the English-only investor, blinked at everyone. Wait, what did she say? Karim's expression flickered. Confusion, right arrow, irritation, right arrow, realization, right arrow, horror. He opened his mouth, but the room wasn't listening to him anymore. They were listening to me. I continued, still in Arabic, tone cool enough to frost glass. "To answer your question, no, I am not intellectually limited. Yes, I understood every word you have spoken for the past 40 minutes. And no," I let the pause breathe. "You cannot afford what you just proposed, not in money, not in dignity, and not in the consequences you're about to face." A breathless silence wrapped around our table like a new atmosphere. Karim tried to recover with a scoff. "You're overreacting," he said, switching to English as if it offered safe harbor. "It was." I switched to English too, so everyone could hear. "Mr. Al-Zarani, there was no miscommunication. You said I let my tone remain steady, and I quote." I repeated his 3 worst statements, translated cleanly without profanity but with their exact meaning intact. "Those were your words." The restaurant around us shifted, the subtle collective inhale of an audience that realizes it's watching something irreversible. Karim's jaw worked, searching for a response. Victor, across the room, saw the tension spike and rushed over. His face was already panicked. "Layla, what is going on here, Mr. Al-Zarani? I am so sorry." Karim seized the opportunity like a drowning man grabbing debris. "Fire her," he barked. "Right now." I did not look at him. I looked at Victor. "Call Marcus Fairmont," I said quietly. "Tell him Layla Al-Rashid needs to speak with him." Victor froze. Karim blinked. Farah's eyes widened. Yusuf whispered, "No way," and that moment, the collective suspension, the recognition that something seismic had just cracked open, that was when everything began. Victor's face drained of color. He opened and closed his mouth like he was searching for a script, some pre-approved managerial response that could rescue him from the moment. But there wasn't one. There was nothing in his training manual about what to do when a waitress invoked the name of a CEO she wasn't supposed to know. "Layla Al-Rashid?" he repeated, voice wobbling. Karim's head snapped toward me. "What did you say your name was?" I ignored him. "Call Marcus Fairmont," I repeated to Victor, calm, steady, the tone of someone who expects obedience not because of arrogance but because they've earned it. Victor swallowed. "I'm Marcus, he's in a board meeting right now. I can't interrupt." You can," I said. "And you will. Tell him it's about the compliance audit I warned him he would eventually need." Victor's breath hitched. Recognition flashed. He had heard the name before, not from me, but from upper management speaking in hushed tones. The consultant with the reputation for tearing apart internal systems that pretended to protect employees but actually protected revenue. The one who abruptly left Whitmore Consulting under mysterious circumstances. The one Marcus Fairmont had once said he hoped to hire once she stopped being angry enough to burn down companies. He finally found the courage to turn away and pull out his phone. Karim stood abruptly, his chair scraping the floor, a sound that sliced through the restaurant's tension. "You." He pointed at me as if pointing could erase the last 60 seconds. "You're a liar. This is some con, some performance, some manipulative stunt to what?" I asked softly. "To expose you. You did that yourself." His nostrils flared. "Don't test me," he said. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes," I replied. "And that's precisely the problem." His hand shook slightly as he grabbed his phone, whether from anger, fear, or the sudden realization that tonight's script had veered off course, I couldn't tell. "Security," he shouted toward the entrance. "I want this woman removed." "No," Victor said suddenly. Everyone turned. "No," Karim repeated, disbelief coloring the edges of the word. "No," Victor's voice was small but firm. "Not until I speak with Mr. Fairmont. I'm not risking the company's liability if Ms. Al-Rashid is who she says she is." I watched trust shift in the air like a weather pattern. Loyalty reoriented itself not to the richest man in the room, but to the one who sounded like she knew the rules better than the powerful man breaking them. Karim turned toward me, eyes narrowing. "Al-Rashid," he repeated, the name tasting unfamiliar in his mouth. Wait, his pupils dilated. "You're that Al-Rashid, the consultant from Whitmore, the one who told your board 3 years ago," I finished for him, "that partnering with your tech fund was a legal risk due to multiple harassment allegations you had settled privately." The table went still. Farah's fork slipped from her fingers. David leaned forward, confused. "Wait, what allegations?" Karim snapped at him. "Not now." "Oh, I think now is perfect," I said. Karim's face hardened. "Those allegations were lies from disgruntled employees." 7 women, I corrected. $14 million in settlements. 3 NDAs with evidence trails sloppy enough for me to verify. Would you like me to continue? Farah's breath shuddered. Hassan's eyes darted around, calculating new alliances. Yusuf looked physically ill. Victor returned, phone in hand, eyes wide. He picked up, Victor stammered. Marcus picked up. Karim scoffed. "Put him on speaker, I'll fix this." Victor didn't look at him, he handed the phone to me. "Ms. Al-Rashid, he asked to speak with you." Karim froze, the restaurant froze. I placed the phone against my ear. "Marcus," I said. My voice was steady, but inside I filed every second away like evidence. "Layla," Marcus Fairmont answered immediately. His tone was a mixture of surprise and concern. "My PR team just sent me a clip circulating online. They said you were involved. Tell me what happened." "I believe Table 7 will explain itself," I replied. Karim surged forward. "Marcus, this is a misunderstanding. This woman is—" "Stop," Marcus said sharply. "Karim, I saw the footage. This isn't a misunderstanding, and our meeting tomorrow is cancelled." Karim's mouth opened, then closed. Marcus continued. "Layla, whatever documentation you have, send it to the legal team, immediately. We'll handle the rest." "I should warn you," I said, "it's 4 months' worth." A murmur rippled through the restaurant. Marcus exhaled. "Of course it is. I should have hired you when I had the chance." I hung up. Karam stared at me, stunned face crumbling in slow, visible stages, rage right arrow, confusion right arrow, fear right arrow, calculation, and then a soft voice broke the silence. I resign. It came from Farah. She stood up, legs shaking but voice clear. I resign, she repeated in perfect English. Effective immediately. Karam whipped toward her. You dare, she extended her phone toward me. I have recordings, she said quietly. 2 years worth, emails, texts, documents, I didn't know who to give them to until now. Her voice cracked, not with fear but relief. Across the room, a diner stood up, holding a press badge. Gulf Business Review, he said, Ms. Al-Rashid, would you like to make a statement? Karam's world started collapsing so fast even gravity looked shocked. He reached for control, but control was gone. Reputations fall quietly. Empires fall loudly. This one was about to fall in surround sound, and I wasn't done. The journalist stepped closer, cautious, respectful, sensing he had walked into the story of his career. His camera was already recording. Dozens of phones lifted around the restaurant. Table 7, once protected by money and fear, was now a stage. Karam felt the shift before he understood it. His empire wasn't falling because of what he'd said. It was falling because, for the first time in his life, someone had refused to look away. Turn those off, he barked. This is private property, you can't film. The journalist didn't blink. Actually, he said calmly, Dubai law allows recording of a public altercation when harassment is involved. In this, he gestured to the table, is harassment documented on multiple devices. Karam looked around, searching for support. He found none. Hassan stared at the tablecloth. Yusuf whispered something that sounded a lot like a prayer. Mahmoud reached for his water, hands trembling. David kept saying, someone please tell me what is happening, with increasing desperation. Farah stepped away from the table. The courage that had been growing inside her all night finally took full bloom. Karam, she said quietly, I've worked for you for 3 years. I gave you every hour of my life. I defended you. I justified you. I told myself your comments were cultural, generational, stress-induced. But they were. Her voice cracked just once. They were cruelty, and I let you teach me it was normal. Karam scoffed, but it sounded hollow. Farah, you contributed nothing. You were promoted because No, she cut in. I was promoted because I stayed quiet. I'm done being quiet. A collective inhale swept the room. This was no longer about a dinner gone wrong. It was about the entire architecture of silence cracking open. I stepped forward and placed a steadying hand on Farah's shoulder. It wasn't pity, it was solidarity, something Karam had never learned to recognize. You said you have proof, I murmured. Farah nodded, eyes glistening. Everything he ever said off camera, everything he thought no one would believe, I backed it all up. Good, I said, you're safe now. Karam exploded. No, she is, he shouted. None of you are. I know people. This, I said, turning to him, is exactly your problem. You think connections are armor, but they're a cage. You built your reputation on the assumption that no one would speak back. I pointed at the phones recording us. Tonight, the world speaks back. Karam lunged toward me, not to hit me, but to intimidate the way men like him do, leaning in too close, voice low, breath heavy with rage. This isn't over, he spat. You think you've won. I will bury you in lawsuits. I will make sure you never work again. I will. You already tried to bury me, I said, voice calm as steel. Ask Richard Whitmore how that went. He froze. His rage evaporated, replaced by something darker, recognition. You, he whispered. You were the one who sabotaged the Whitmore expansion deal. You cost them millions. No, I corrected. What do you want? He whispered. Money, apology, a settlement, what? I looked at him with the clearest truth he'd ever seen. I don't want your money, I don't want your apology, I want you to feel what your victims felt. Powerless in a room where no one will lie for you. His jaw quivered. And that, I added, is already happening. Karam rose slow, broken. He turned to leave, but at the doorway, desperation made him pivot back. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. This woman is a fraud. She lied about her identity. She manipulated all of you. She's the criminal, not me. The room went silent. Phones lifted again, and I smiled, not smugly. Not cruelly, but knowingly. Because he had just handed me the one thing I needed, a public invitation to explain exactly why I had done what I had done. "Thank you," I said softly. "You just made this easier." I stepped into the center of the room, turned to the crowd, and took a breath. "My name," I began, "is Layla Al-Rashid, and yes, I came here under a different name. Let me tell you why." In the restaurant, every server, every diner, every shaking witness leaned forward, because now they wanted the whole truth, and I was finally ready to give it to them. The restaurant fell into a hush so complete it felt ceremonial. Even the clatter from the kitchen paused, as though the building itself leaned closer to hear. I stepped forward, not because I wanted the spotlight, but because the truth deserved to stand in a place where it couldn't be twisted. "I worked here under a different name," I said, my voice steady, controlled. "Not to deceive, not to manipulate, but to observe." A woman at a nearby table nodded, phone raised, her eyes softened with something like recognition. "I left a highly paid consulting career when a senior partner stole my work, minimized my contribution, and reminded me that power loves silence. I realized that most abuse doesn't happen in boardrooms. It happens in places like this." I gestured gently around the restaurant. Places where the wealthy whisper things they think the staff can't understand. Places where dignity becomes optional the moment money enters the conversation. Several servers stood frozen in place, tray in hand, wine bottle mid-pour, not daring to move. "So," I continued, "I decided to go invisible on purpose. I used my mother's maiden name. I put away my degrees, my credentials, my corporate suits, and I took a job that would let me watch the world from the bottom up." Karim laughed bitterly from the entrance. "You're insane." "No," I replied, "I'm thorough." A ripple of quiet amusement moved through a few diners, not mockery, admiration. I turned to the crowd again. "I worked here for 4 months, and I documented 37 separate incidents of harassment, discrimination, and abuse from patrons toward staff." Gasps, whispers, a few phones lowered out of sheer discomfort. "Managers apologized to the abusers," I said, not accusing Victor but stating truth. "Policies were ignored because they cost too much. Staff endured because they couldn't risk losing their jobs." A young server near the bar wiped her eyes quickly. "This is not unique to the peninsula," I said. "This is a pattern across hospitality worldwide. A pattern people pretend not to see." I gestured to Farah, who stood beside me like a woman reclaiming the ground beneath her feet. "And sometimes the people who suffer the most are the ones sitting quietly at the table, just trying to survive." Farah lowered her gaze, emotional. "It wasn't my intention to become the center of this story," I continued. "But tonight, the story found me." Karim scoffed. "Oh, please. You're performing for an audience?" "For once," I said sharply. "Listen." He fell silent. I faced the room fully now. I left corporate life because I refused to stay in a system that rewarded silence. And I came here because I wanted to understand how to fix it from the ground up. A beat. And because people like him, I nodded toward Karim, never expected someone like me to be listening. Karim's jaw clenched. "And they never expected someone like Farah," I added, "to stop being afraid." Farah exhaled sharply, tears finally breaking. I placed a hand on her back, gentle, steadying. "I'm not a hero," I said. "I'm a mirror. I reflect behavior back at the people who think their power shields them from consequence." I took a breath, then spoke directly to the diner's recording. "So record this." The room tightened. "Post this, share it. Make it impossible for companies to ignore what happens in their own dining rooms. Let this moment be the one that forces a conversation that should have happened years ago." A murmur of agreement rippled through the staff. "And to Fairmont International," I said, "I am giving you 48 hours to implement real, enforceable protection protocols for your employees. If you don't, I will release everything I've documented." Victor inhaled sharply. This wasn't a threat, it was a deadline. "And to every worker," I said softly, "who has ever been told to smile through disrespect, who has ever been treated like furniture, who has ever learned to make themselves invisible to survive, I see you." A few sniffles broke the silence. "You are not powerless, document everything, find allies, find your moment." The journalist lowered his camera slightly, not out of disinterest but reverence. "And to Mr. Al-Zarani," Karim straightened defensively, Thank you. The room turned toward him. Karim blinked. What, thank you, I repeated, for providing the perfect case study for my first white paper on ethical hospitality reform. A laugh burst from one diner, then another, then a cascade of quiet, stunned chuckles. Karim's face flushed scarlet. This isn't over, he shouted again, but the words no longer carried weight. Because the entire kitchen staff had stepped out to watch. Because security was waiting to escort him out. Because his associates were quietly backing away from him, one by one. And because his empire was already collapsing in real time. When he finally stormed out of the restaurant, past the journalists, the phones, the staff whose eyes no longer held fear, something shifted. Not just for him, for everyone watching. The silence he left behind wasn't empty. It was full. Full of relief, full of realization, full of the sound of a system cracking open. Farah leaned toward me. Can I come with you? She whispered. I think I'm ready to do more than survive. You're not coming with me, I said softly. Her face fell. You're joining me? And that was the moment in that restaurant under bright lights, surrounded by the wreckage of Karim's power, that a new story began. A story about rebuilding, about accountability, about dignity. And about the people who finally learned how to speak back. Farah stood beside me, trembling, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was release. The kind that comes after years of forced stillness. The kind that feels like oxygen finally reaching the bottom of the lungs. Before I could say another word, security stepped forward. Ms. Al-Rashid, the head of security said cautiously, we're filing the incident report now. Do you want to provide a formal statement? Yes, I replied. But later tonight, I need to finish something first. He nodded, stepping back. For the first time since I started working here, a member of management deferred to me, not because of my uniform, but because of my authority. Around us, the restaurant began to breathe again. Diners whispered. Phones buzzed. The tension that had hovered like smoke began to dissipate. Victor approached slowly, like a man walking toward a cliff he didn't realize he was standing on. Layla, he said, voice thick with guilt. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know. You didn't want to know, I said quietly. There's a difference. He swallowed, throat bobbing. But you can fix it, I continued, softening slightly. If you choose to. His shoulders sagged. Tell me how. You'll hear from Fairmont's legal team, I said, and from me. He nodded, relieved and terrified at the same time. Farah tugged lightly at my sleeve. Layla, he ruined so many lives, women who didn't have your privilege or mine. I nodded. And that's exactly why we're not done. At that moment, Nadia burst through the front entrance, one hand holding her phone, the other gripping a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. Layla, she said, slightly breathless. It's already trending. Peninsula incident has 90,000 views in the last 12 minutes. Major outlets are requesting interviews. 2 lawyers have emailed and 3 women have reached out saying they want to file complaints against Karim. Farah inhaled sharply, clasping her hand over her mouth. This is really happening, she whispered. Nadia hugged me, then turned to Farah. You must be Farah, I've heard a lot about you. Farah blinked. You have. Layla said you had courage even if you didn't know how to use it yet. Farah's eyes watered again. Before I could reply, David, still seated, still confused, finally spoke. I'm sorry, he said, lifting his hands. But can someone please explain, in English, why my partner just blew up his entire reputation and why half the restaurant is filming? I stepped closer to him. You were on the board with a man who harassed his staff, manipulated his team, violated multiple NDAs, and did so believing he was untouchable. David blinked. That's serious. Yes, I said. And that's why you need to recuse yourself from every deal connected to him, immediately, before this reaches your shareholders. David went pale. I'll contact the board tonight. Good, I said, you should. Hassan, the senior yes-man, stood abruptly, sweat beading at the edges of his receding hairline. This is all exaggerated, he muttered. Karim was under stress. You're blowing. Farah stepped forward, voice unexpectedly sharp. If you defend him right now, she said, you might as well tattoo his downfall on your forehead. Hassan froze. Mahmoud raised a hand. I'm out, he said quietly. I don't want my career tied to this. Yusuf nodded. Same. Their defection rippled like a crack through Karim's support system. The journalist approached again. Ms. Al-Rashid, he said, I know this is chaotic, but would you like to give a brief official statement now? Just a few sentences. I glanced around at the scared staff, at the shaken diners, at the empty space where Karim had stood, then I shook my head. Not here, I said. Not while emotions are high. Truth doesn't need adrenaline, it needs precision. He nodded, impressed. I'll wait, he said, but I hope you do speak soon. I will, I assured him. Nadia tugged my arm again. Layla, you need to see this. She tilted her phone toward me. A video of the confrontation at table 7, 30 seconds long, already at 312,000 views. Comments pouring in, some shocked, some angry, some empowered. One stood out. For every worker who's ever swallowed disrespect. This woman just became our voice. I exhaled long, steady. Farah whispered, this is bigger than us now. Yes, I said, but it started with us. I turned back to the restaurant. The staff was still watching, some with awe, some with relief. Some with the disbelief of people who just witnessed a hierarchy collapse in real time. So I stepped onto the small platform near the bar, a place usually reserved for wine demonstrations or quiet announcements. Tonight, it would serve a different purpose. Everyone, I said gently, I'm going to finish my statement outside with the press, but before I do, every head turned. This isn't about punishing a man, it's about protecting a system. If anything I said tonight made you feel seen, stay tuned, because this is just the beginning. A murmur of agreement swept across the floor, then applause, soft at first. A few hands, then more, then the entire staff, not polite applause. Not performative applause, but applause that came from the part of the soul that recognizes justice even when it's imperfect. Farah squeezed my hand. Where do we go from here? She whispered. I smiled, small, tired, knowing. Forward, I said, always forward. And together we walked toward the doors, toward the cameras, toward the journalists, toward the aftermath waiting beyond the marble floor. Toward the part of the story where consequences finally begin. Outside, the heat of the Dubai night wrapped around us. Not oppressive, alive, like the city itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what came next. The entrance of the peninsula was flooded with lights, some from the decorative lamps, most from phones, cameras, and news crews who had arrived faster than seemed humanly possible. A dozen lenses turned toward me instantly. Farah stiffened beside me. Nadia squared her shoulders like a bodyguard made of legal degrees. I stepped forward, not because I wanted to, because everyone behind me needed me to. Ms. Al-Rashid, Layla. Was the billionaire escorted out? Is it true you worked undercover? Do you have evidence of wrongdoing? What happens next? The questions fired like bullets, each one tinged with urgency. None of them surprised me. I raised a hand. I'll answer everything, one at a time. A silence fell, the respectful kind journalists reserve for moments they know will become archival footage. I began. Tonight wasn't an accident. Cameras zoomed in. It was the culmination of 4 months of observation, data gathering, and documentation on workplace dignity within the hospitality sector. A reporter in a navy suit stepped forward. Why you? Why go undercover? Because systems don't change from boardrooms, I said. They change when the people those systems ignore finally speak. A woman from College Times called out, "Are you planning legal action?" No, I said. Legal action is for victims. My role is to expose patterns so victims can come forward safely. A ripple ran through the crowd. And have they? Another reporter asked. Nadia lifted her phone. 3 contacted us in the last 20 minutes. More will. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured. The beginning of a storm gathered in real time. Farah cleared her throat. Her nerves looked like glass on the verge of shattering, but her voice when she spoke was strong. I would like to make a statement, she said. Every camera pivoted. She stepped forward slowly. My name is Farah Nazari, she said. I worked for Mr. Al-Zarani for 3 years. I documented harassment, discrimination, and repeated misconduct. I remained silent because I needed my job. Her voice cracked, soft but powerful. I'm not silent anymore. A sound moved through the press line, not shock, not theatrics, but respect. She placed a USB drive in my hand. This is everything, she whispered. I squeezed her fingers. Thank you for trusting me. A man in a blazer called out, Ms. Nazari, are you filing charges? Farah shook her head. I'm giving my evidence to Ms. Al-Rashid so she can help build a case that protects others. The crowd buzzed louder. I stepped closer to the microphones. To everyone watching, I said, this is not a scandal, this is a symptom. Silence again. The hospitality industry thrives on invisibility, the idea that servers, cleaners, hostesses, and staff are background noise. Tonight proves that the background is watching, listening, recording. One of the senior journalists from Gulf Business Review asked, "What happens next for you, for the company, for him?" I drew a steady breath. "Consequences," I said simply. I held up my tablet. "Fairmont International has received all files. I expect a public statement within hours." A few gasps. "Second," I continued, "I will be publishing a comprehensive white paper detailing misconduct patterns, systemic failures, and recommendations for global hospitality reform." "And Mr. Al-Zahrani?" someone shouted. I looked directly into the nearest camera. "That," I said, "is up to the legal system, his board, and his victims, not me." A sudden chorus of notifications went off, phones vibrating everywhere. Nadia checked hers first, eyes widening. She turned the screen toward me, a headline flashed across it, breaking. Al-Zahrani removed from Fairmont Expansion Board pending investigation. Farah covered her mouth. Reporters shouted over each other. "What's your response, Ms. Al-Rashid? Did your evidence trigger this? Do you consider this a victory?" I raised my hand again. "This is not my victory," I said. "This is accountability, and accountability is only the first step." A voice from the back called out, "What is the second step?" I felt every camera, every eye, every trembling worker behind the glass doors of the peninsula listening. "The second step," I said, "is rebuilding, with policies that protect, systems that listen, and companies that value dignity as much as profit." Another notification pinged, then another, then dozens, hashtags exploding on social media, interviews requested, a global audience forming. Someone asked, "Ms. Al-Rashid, are you planning to return to consulting?" I smiled slightly. "I never left," I said, "I just changed the fieldwork." A soft laugh moved through the crowd, then a final question came, quiet, hesitant, from a young journalist who looked barely 20. "Do you think," he asked, "one person can really change an industry?" I turned to Farah, to Nadia, to the staff watching from the doorway, to the phones recording in trembling hands, to the strangers who found courage in this moment. "One person," I said. "No," I stepped back toward the camera, "but one person can start the change." The crowd erupted in camera flashes. Someone shouted my name, someone else yelled hero, a few clapped, but I didn't linger. I placed a hand on Farah's back. "Come on," I whispered. "We're not done yet." We walked into the night, not quietly, not invisibly, but with a clarity that cut through the noise. This wasn't the climax. This was the beginning of the aftermath. And the aftermath was going to change everything. We left the crowd only when the journalists began dispersing and the restaurant doors finally closed behind the last shaken diner. But the night was far from over. Nadia led us toward the parking area where the city hummed with its usual midnight electricity, taxis gliding by, neon reflections shimmering on pavement, the scent of oud lingering in the warm air. Farah walked with her arms folded tightly across her chest, not defensive, but overwhelmed by the weight of finally being heard. "You held yourself together incredibly well," Nadia said gently. Farah shook her head. I felt like I was going to collapse. "You didn't," I said. "That's the point." She exhaled shakily. "What happens now?" I had an answer, one shaped by 4 months of planning, 2 years of surviving betrayal, and an entire lifetime of being underestimated. "We go to my place," I said. "Sort through the evidence, build the files, line up attorneys, prepare statements, and by morning the system won't be able to look away." Farah blinked. "Your place?" "Yes," I said. "We're doing this properly. Everything documented, everything protected." Nadia gave her a small smile. "Welcome to the team." Farah's eyes glistened. It wasn't glamour, it was relief. The relief of being pulled out of a world she thought she'd drown in. As we reached my car, Nadia tapped her phone. "The video's at 4 million views," she said. 27 women have reached out and oh," she stopped mid-sentence. "What?" I asked. She turned the screen. A new headline scrolled across. "Breaking: 3 investors withdraw from Al-Zahrani's AI venture within the hour." Farah gasped. Nadia kept scrolling. And his board scheduled an emergency meeting at 8 a.m., she added. They're calling him a reputational risk. Farah covered her mouth. This is happening so fast. This is what happens, I said, when truth and proof collide. We entered the car, the doors shut with a muted thump, a brief pocket of quiet after the storm. Farah stared out the window as we pulled away from the peninsula. I know he deserves this, she whispered. But part of me feels guilty. I nodded. That's normal. Women are conditioned to feel responsible even when we're harmed. She wiped her cheek. What do you feel? She asked me. I paused, then answered honestly. I feel tired, I said, and clear and ready. The city lights strobed across her face as she watched the passing buildings. You said something earlier, Farah murmured. This isn't victory, it's accountability. I keep thinking about that. That's because it's true, I replied. Victory suggests something ends. Accountability means something begins. She let the words settle. And what begins now? I smiled faintly, a smile that wasn't triumphant, just real. Work, I said. We reached my apartment, a high floor overlooking the marina, quiet, understated, full of white spaces and clean lines. This wasn't extravagance, this was clarity, a place built for thinking. Farah walked in slowly, almost reverently. I've never been somewhere like this. You will, I said, soon. We settled around the dining table. Evidence spread across the surface like the blueprint of a collapsing empire. Audio files, emails, screenshots, transcripts, 3 NDAs, settlement contracts, HR complaints buried by corporate lawyers, recordings Farah had taken at meetings. Nadia powered up her laptop. Farah handed me the USB with trembling fingers. This is everything, she said. I saved all of it. In case someday you did the right thing, I said, and now we do the rest. We worked for hours, sorting, labeling, creating folders, cross-referencing dates. Farah read certain documents with a shaking breath. At one point she whispered, "He ruined people, real people, not numbers." Her voice cracked. And I stayed, I let it happen. "Farah," I said gently, "you survived, there is a difference." She nodded, though guilt still lingered in the lines of her face. Around 3 a.m. Nadia checked her phone. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Layla, you need to see this." She handed me the screen. A video of the confrontation, captioned in both English and Arabic, had crossed 10 million views. Comments filled the screen. This is history. Finally, someone fights back. Hotels everywhere need to watch this. Every service worker in the world is cheering. "Thank you, Layla. Thank you, Farah." Farah covered her mouth again, this time not in fear, but in disbelief. "I never thought anyone would care," she whispered. "They do," I said, "because your story is thousands of people's story." Another notification pinged, then 5 more. Nadia read them quickly. Requests for interviews, 3 offers for consulting contracts, a hospitality CEO asking for your number, and oh, Fairmont wants to talk at 8 a.m. sharp. "About what?" Farah asked. "About implementing the reforms Layla recommended last year," Nadia said, then glanced at me. "Looks like they're finally ready to listen." I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion blending with purpose. "We'll go," I said. "But on our terms?" Farah looked between us. "What about Karim?" she whispered. "He'll face consequences," I said. "Not instantly, not perfectly, but thoroughly." "And us?" Farah asked softly. I looked her in the eyes. "You," I said, "are going to help me build something bigger than revenge." Her breath caught. "Something that protects people who don't have the choice to walk away." Her eyes filled again, but this time with something stronger than fear. Resolve. "And me?" Nadia asked with a grin. "You," I said, "are the backbone as usual." She laughed. Then Farah asked the question that had been trembling inside her since we left the restaurant. "Do you think we really made a difference tonight?" I thought about it, the servers clapping, the diners standing, the millions watching, the policies shifting, the victims reaching out, the empire cracking. Then I answered, "Yes," I said, "but tonight wasn't the difference." They both frowned. "What was?" Farah asked. "The moment," I said, "you decided to stop being silent." Farah inhaled a sharp breath. "That," I continued, "is where every revolution starts." We worked until dawn, sorting files, drafting documents, preparing for the tidal wave of morning consequences. And as the sun began rising over Dubai, painting the skyline gold, Farah looked out the window and whispered, "I feel free." I nodded. "You are." but in truth, this was only the beginning. Because the next 72 hours would shake the world far harder than anything that happened at Table 7. 72 hours later, Dubai moved fast, but for the next 3 days, it moved around us. The city's usual rhythm, commerce, tourism, glittering distraction, kept beating, but beneath it ran a second current, the story, our story, and it spread like wildfire. Day 1, the collapse begins. I was sipping bitter Arabic coffee in my apartment when Nadia looked up from her laptop. "It's everywhere," she whispered. On screen, the incident played on a loop, subtitled, analyzed, debated. News anchors dissected it, experts weighed in. Clips spread across Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, and even international news. A hashtag dominated all of them. Peninsula incident, dignity at work. Layla Al-Rashid Farah sat frozen on my couch, blanket around her shoulders, watching the world finally believe what she'd endured. Then, a notification popped up. Breaking. 2 board members of Al-Zahrani Holdings resign, citing ethical differences. Farah gasped. "What already?" Nadia scrolled. "He's been disinvited from 3 conferences and 2 investment panels. They don't want to be associated with him." Another headline, custody lawyer for Al-Zahrani's ex-wife files emergency motion for character review. Farah whispered, "He's losing everything." I shook my head gently. No. He's losing power without consequence. It's not everything, but it's enough to stop him from hurting more women. She nodded slowly, absorbing that truth. Then my phone buzzed, a message from Fairmont International, meeting scheduled. 8 a.m. mandatory attendance, please bring your findings. Nadia exhaled. "Layla, they're taking you seriously." "Not me," I said. "The evidence." "And you," she insisted, "who collected it." The Peninsula staff meeting at 11 a.m. Victor called an emergency meeting for all staff. We stood in the back, observing, not intruding. Victor addressed them with a trembling voice. "Effective immediately," he said, "this restaurant will enforce zero-tolerance policies toward harassment regardless of the customer's status." A ripple of disbelief passed through the room, then applause, real applause. Sarah, one of the waitresses I'd worked with for months, hugged me after the meeting. "You didn't just save yourself," she whispered. "You saved all of us." I hugged her back. "You deserved it long before I arrived." Day 2, the ripple effect by the next. Karim didn't disappear, men like him never do, but the world around him changed. He stepped down from 2 boards. Investors withdrew support. His AI venture lost funding. His ex-wife gained full leverage in their custody battle. Corporate allies issued statements distancing themselves. Journalists dug up older allegations. He was labeled a reputational hazard. He wasn't destroyed, he was diminished. And that was more powerful and more realistic than any fantasy ending. On the evening of day 3, Farah arrived at my apartment in a simple blouse, not designer, not corporate, just comfortable. "I quit my job for good," she said. "Good," I replied. "I want to join you." "You already have," I said. She smiled, soft, proud, reborn. At 10 p.m. my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A quiet voice on the other end. "Layla." "Yes, I'm calling from London. I was a waitress there for 5 years. Today my manager yelled at me." I showed him your video. My throat tightened and I whispered. "He apologized," she said. "For the first time, he apologized." "Thank you, you gave me courage." The call ended. I sat in silence, absorbing the weight of it. Farah touched my arm. Nadia smiled. "It's starting," Nadia whispered. "What is?" Farah asked. "The change," I said. The next morning, I opened my laptop. Our white paper draft blinked on the screen. Its title, The Invisible Worker, a 4-month study in hospitality power dynamics. Co-authored by Layla Al-Rashid, Farah Nazari, Nadia Khalid. And beneath it, dedicated to everyone who learned to be invisible to survive, and everyone learning to be visible again. I closed the laptop gently. The world outside glowed gold with sunrise. "We're just getting started," I said. Farah took a deep breath. "I'm ready." Nadia smiled. "Let's change an industry." And as the sun climbed over Dubai, brushing the skyline with light, we stepped into the next chapter. Not of the scandal, not of the revenge, but of the rebuilding, because justice is not the end, it's the beginning. The peninsula didn't look the same. The marble floors still gleamed. The chandeliers still glowed. The perfume of saffron and sumac still drifted from the kitchen. but something fundamental had shifted: the atmosphere. Lighter, safer, different, because dignity had become policy, not suggestion, not performance policy. I walked through the lobby in a tailored navy blazer, holding a slim leather portfolio. My heels clicked softly against the floor as I took in the sight of a place I once served in silence, now standing taller because of the voices that finally rose. At the reception desk, Sarah spotted me, her smile stretched wide, genuine, warm, relieved. "Ms. Al-Rashid," she said, stepping forward, "welcome back." "Just Layla," I replied, returning her smile. She laughed lightly. "Not anymore. You're practically a celebrity after what you did for us." "I didn't just do it for you," I said. "I did it with you." Her eyes glistened. "We know, thank you." Sarah was no longer a waitress. She was now an assistant manager. Promoted for her consistency, her kindness, her leadership long overshadowed by louder men. We hugged briefly, two women on opposite sides of the same truth. I continued toward the restaurant. Table 7 waited near the window, a place once tainted by arrogance and now disinfected by truth. I sat in the same chair where Karim once held court. Not to reclaim it, but to rewrite it. A young waitress approached with a small tremor in her steps. She couldn't have been more than 20. "Good afternoon," she said. "My name is Amira. I'll be taking care of you today." She smiled nervously, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I saw myself in her. I saw every woman who had ever been dismissed, underestimated, instructed to be small. "How are you treated here?" I asked gently, switching to Arabic. Her eyes widened, surprised someone important would speak to her in the language of her heart. "Honestly," she whispered, "better, much better. They listen now, they protect us because of you." I shook my head softly. "Not because of me," I said, "because you deserve it." Her smile, shy and sincere, was all the confirmation I needed that the aftermath hadn't just been noise. It had become change. She took my order with confidence. Her hands didn't shake, her smile didn't falter. When she left, I placed a business card on the table. Al-Rashid Ethics Consulting. Founder and lead strategist. Layla Al-Rashid. A quiet promise: if you ever need help, call. After lunch, Sarah guided me through the staff area, no longer cramped, no longer silenced. There were new employee protection protocols, multilingual harassment training, a private reporting system, mental health check-ins, a visible workers' charter posted on the wall. And pride, real pride. "This is because of your white paper," Sarah said. "It's because they finally listened," I corrected. We entered the boardroom. Victor stood waiting. A little older, a little humbler, a lot more accountable. He stepped forward. "Layla," he said, "thank you for agreeing to join the ethics review." "I don't judge," I said, "I guide." He nodded, relieved. "We're ready to be better," he said, truly. And I believed him. Change didn't require perfection. It required willingness. Farah waited for me in the lobby, tapping on her tablet, reviewing the training schedule for a chain of hotels requesting our services. "You're late," she teased. "The staff had questions," I said. "They always do," she replied. "That's good." Her hair was different now, looser, softer, less tightly controlled. It was a small detail, but it spoke volumes. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than expected," I said. "Expected by you," Nadia cut in, joining us from the elevator. "You underestimate how much people trust you now." "I don't want trust," I said. "I want systems." Nadia smiled. "You've built both." We walked out together, past the lobby where new applicants filled out forms for roles that now came with actual protection. Outside, the Dubai sun glowed gold across the pavement. Farah said, "Do you ever regret it? Leaving your consulting firm, hiding your identity, the months undercover, everything?" I considered the question, not rushing it, not dramatizing it. Then I answered, "No, not once." "Why?" she asked quietly. "Because invisibility taught me how people behave when they think no one is watching." I looked back at the peninsula. Invisibility taught them what happens when someone is. Farah breathed deeply. Nadia smiled proudly. As we walked toward the street, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. I opened it. I was a waitress in London. My manager used to mock my accent. "Yesterday I showed him your video," he apologized. "Thank you for giving me strength, M." The world seemed to pause, not loudly but softly. A quiet kind of victory. I locked the screen. Farah touched my arm. "Good message." "A meaningful one," I said. We stood on the sidewalk as the city buzzed. Cars moving, people living, the world shifting forward in the small and massive ways that change always begins. So, Nadia said, clasping her hands, what's next? I looked at the building behind us, at the people inside, at the systems being rewritten because one moment broke the silence. Then I answered, next. A slow smile, we help the next place and the next and the next. The city breeze lifted the corner of my blazer. Because this isn't the end, I said, it's the start of the work that actually matters. And with that, 3 women who once lived in the shadows walked into the bright, blinding warmth of the Dubai afternoon. Not invisible, not silent, not afraid, just beginning. 6 months after the night that changed everything, I found myself standing in front of the peninsula once more, this time not as a server, not as an investigator, not as a whistleblower, but as a consultant reviewing the very protocols I'd helped create. The marble entrance was the same. The scent of warm vanilla oud drifted from the lobby just as comforting as before. But everything else, the energy, the culture, the unspoken dynamics, had transformed, and so had I. I adjusted my blazer, exhaled, and stepped inside. The restaurant was filled with familiar faces, but their postures had changed. They stood straighter, spoke louder, moved with confidence instead of caution. Sarah waved at me from the front counter. No longer rushing, no longer apologizing for customers' behavior, but managing with firm grace. You came, she said, rushing over. I hoped you would. Wouldn't miss it, I replied. I'm so glad, she said. Everything's different now because of you. I shook my head gently. Because of all of you, I said. I just turned on the light. She smiled, knowing and grateful. I walked to table 7. The same table where the old world cracked open. Today it held none of that weight. A new server, a young woman with warm eyes, approached. Good afternoon, she said. My name is Amira. May I offer you the special today? Her voice carried something rare, safety. How has work been? I asked softly. She tilted her head, confused. Then her eyes widened in recognition. You're her, she breathed, the woman who. She didn't need to finish the sentence. How are you treated here now? I asked in Arabic, her expression softened. With respect, thanks to your work, truly. I nodded, because this, more than the headlines, more than the white paper, more than the accolades, was the real victory. She placed a glass of water on the table and said, if you ever need anything, I'm here. The irony made me smile. When she stepped away, I placed a card on the table, LRASHID Ethics Consulting. If you ever feel unheard, call. Then I stood. I didn't need to sit at table 7 ever again. Victor stood waiting in the boardroom, nerves replaced with determination. Layla, he said, shaking my hand, thank you again for everything. We've implemented almost all of your policies. He gestured to the wall, anti-harassment posters in 4 languages. A hotline monitored by an independent firm. A worker's dignity charter. A staff customer code of conduct. Anonymous incident reporting. Quarterly compliance workshops. We even let go of a regular patron last week for disrespecting a hostess, Victor said. 2 years ago, we never would have done that. That's because 2 years ago, I said, you didn't know how much people were watching. He nodded. You've made us better, he said quietly, and I needed to apologize. I raised an eyebrow. He swallowed. I should have protected you that night. I didn't. I let fear make me complicit. I softened, then start making sure fear never wins again. I will, he said, and I believed him. Outside, I met Farah and Nadia in the lobby. The moment they saw me, they lit up. Done? Farah asked. For now, I said. Farah was radiating confidence these days. Shoulders back, chin up, hair loose and free. No longer a shadow behind a powerful man, she was powerful herself. You'll never believe this, Nadia said, handing me her phone. 3 more companies want consultations, 1 from Qatar, 1 from Singapore, 1 from New York. And another hotel chain wants us to audit their entire Middle East division, Farah added. Our work, once an experiment, was now an international movement. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was humbled. Are we really doing this? Farah whispered, helping real people. Yes, I said, and we're not even close to done. As we exited the building, the Dubai sun warmed our faces. Tourists swarmed the boulevard. The city hummed with ambition and unspoken stories. My phone vibrated, another message. But this one wasn't from a CEO, a journalist, or a lawyer. It was from a number with an international code. Layla. I was a waitress in London. When my manager mocked me last week, I showed him your video. He apologized. He changed his schedule policy. You gave me courage I didn't know I had, thank you, M. The breath left my chest, not from sadness, not from shock, but from the profound truth that the work mattered. Farah looked at me, good message. The best, I said. We reached the car. I paused before opening the door. Farah asked, what are you thinking about? I looked back at the peninsula. Its shining doors, its new rules, its changed heart. I didn't destroy Karim, I said. He destroyed himself the moment he believed cruelty was consequence-free. Farah nodded, and I didn't change the entire system, I added. I just exposed it. The system changed itself because it had to.